Usually when we talk about learning a new language, there's like this shared collective trauma we all seem to have from high school.
Oh, absolutely. The classic classroom nightmare.
Right. You sit there, you're trying to memorize these massive conjugation tables, staring at some dense textbook, and then out of nowhere, the teacher calls on you in front of the whole class.
And your brain just completely empties out.
Exactly. It's like someone literally pulled the plug. Total deer in the headlights. You know the words, but they flat out refuse to come out of your mouth.
Yeah, and that freeze response, it's essentially a survival mechanism kicking in.
Really? Like actual survival mode.
Oh, yeah. You're put on the spot, the social pressure just spikes, and your cognitive system shuts down to protect you from public failure. I mean, at that point, you're no longer learning anything. Your brain is just trying to survive the moment.
Well, what if I told you there's actually a highly detailed psychological blueprint designed to, hack your brain and completely eliminate that freeze response?
I would say I'm very intrigued.
So we have our hands on this instructional document. It's designed specifically for teaching English to an A2 learner, which is basically the elementary level.
Right, just above absolute beginner.
Yeah. But beneath the surface, it's honestly a masterclass in behavioral psychology. The real mission of our deep dive today is to deconstruct how this specific framework is perfectly engineered to build a learner's speaking confidence and, more importantly, keep them motivated to come back for more.
And when you look closely at the mechanics of this document, I mean, every single instruction is about creating this environment where the learner feels entirely safe to fail.
Yeah, which sounds kind of counterintuitive for a classroom.
It does. But paradoxically, giving them permission to be imperfect is, like, the only way they can actually succeed.
So before we look at how a lesson is actually structured, we have to examine the ground rules, because the document explicitly outlines a required speaking style for the teacher.
Right. The tone is strictly regulated.
Very strictly. The overarching directive is that the teacher must be friendly, encouraging, and most importantly, they have to focus on speaking confidence over grammar perfection.
And that directive alone is just a massive paradigm shift from traditional education.
How so?
Well, normally, grammar is the absolute law, right? You get penalized for every misplaced verb or incorrect tense. But here, the priority is just getting the learner to use their voice without that constant looming fear of correction.
And to guarantee they use their voice, the communication parameters imposed on the teacher are incredibly strict. I mean, the blueprint dictates that the teacher must use short sentences,
Very short.
specifically 5 to 12 words. The vocabulary has to be simple, and there is an absolute non-negotiable rule to avoid difficult grammar and idioms entirely.
Which is so smart.
Yeah. And if a difficult word absolutely must be introduced, the teacher has to explain it simply, just using easy English.
Those constraints, they really act as a psychological safety net. I mean, think about what an idiom actually is.
It's kind of like a cultural inside joke, right?
Exactly, it's an inside joke. If I tell an elementary learner that it's raining cats and dogs, they are suddenly visualizing literal falling animals instead of bad weather.
Right, their brain just short circuits.
Yeah, idioms alienate people. They send this subconscious signal to the learner that says, you are an outsider and you don't understand our secret code.
Man, that reminds me of like setting up a controlled environment in a science lab.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, by strictly enforcing that 5 to 12 word limit and actively stripping away the idioms and complex grammar, you are effectively removing all the unpredictable variables.
Which are the exact things that cause the panic.
Exactly. Those unpredictable variables are what cause beginners to freeze up and just lose their motivation.
Yeah.
You're sealing the room so nothing unexpected can jump out and scare them.
And if we look at the brain science behind why that sealed room is necessary, it really comes down to cognitive load.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So imagine your working memory is a tiny whiteboard in your head.
A tiny whiteboard. Got it.
When a beginner hears a new language, their brain is working in absolute overdrive just to translate basic phonetic sounds into recognizable words, let alone trying to extract meaning.
So the space on that whiteboard is incredibly limited.
It's extremely limited. If a teacher throws a 20-word sentence at them with, like, a complex subordinate clause, the teacher is essentially still writing on the whiteboard while simultaneously erasing the beginning of the sentence just to make room.
Oh, wow. So the learner's working memory literally just overflows.
Exactly. The data is lost and they panic. But a 5 to 12-word sentence, that fits perfectly on the board. They can hold it in their working memory, process it, and actually understand it before the next sentence arrives.
So if we've successfully sealed this lab and cleared the whiteboard, how do you actually start pouring new information in without, overwhelming the whole system?
Well, the blueprint handles this by heavily scaffolding the early stages of the lesson.
Right. First, there's a really quick 1 to 2 minute warm-up just to set expectations and ask 2 easy questions. Then we hit the vocabulary section. And the rhythm here is highly choreographed.
Oh, the document is very specific about this rhythm.
Yeah.
You introduce the word, pronounce it clearly, provide one simple example, invite the learner to repeat it, and then wait.
And we are definitely going to dig into that waiting period in a second because it is honestly the wildest part of this whole methodology.
It really is.
But first, I want to look at how this blueprint handles listening practice. Because I have to admit, this is where I start to get a little skeptical.
Okay, lay it on me.
The document mandates that the teacher read a story, but it must be rigorously short, like just 40 to 80 words. The teacher reads it once slowly, once naturally, and then asks 3 comprehension questions.
Uh-huh.
I have to push back on this. A 40 to 80 word story is basically a text message. It's just a few sentences.
Where does the skepticism come in? Exactly.
Well, I looked at that number and thought, isn't this just baby talk? If the real goal is to prepare an adult learner for the real world, how does this actually help?
You're worried it's not practical.
Right. If you go to an airport or try to order food in a busy restaurant, no one is speaking to you in carefully curated 80-word bursts. Are we just coddling them, like giving them this false sense of security that will completely shatter the second they leave the classroom?
Look, it's a completely valid concern, and it touches on a huge debate in language education right now regarding, authentic materials.
Yeah, exactly. The real stuff.
People often assume that the best way to learn is to be thrown straight into the deep end. Full immersion, raw, unfiltered language.
Yeah.
But, you don't teach someone to swim by throwing them into the ocean during a hurricane, right?
Fair point. You start in the shallow end of a pool.
Exactly.
But 40 words, that's not even the shallow end. That's a puddle.
Let's look at the psychology of motivation here, though. For an A2 learner, an 80-word text in a foreign language isn't a puddle. It is a significant cognitive challenge.
Really? Just 80 words?
Yes. If you give a beginner a 300-word authentic text, they will inevitably encounter like 15 or 20 words they just don't know. They end up spending the entire exercise stumbling. And by the end of it, their primary takeaway is simply, English is incredibly hard and I am terrible at it.
So their motivation takes a massive hit because all they see is the stuff they don't know.
Precisely. The goal of this specific blueprint isn't just to expose them to vocabulary. The real goal is to engineer a psychological victory.
A psychological victory.
Yes. With a 40 to 80-word story, the learner can actually comprehend the entire thing. They understand the setup, the conflict, the resolution. They experience 100% comprehension.
So it's less about the sheer volume of the language and more about that feeling of finishing the task successfully?
That feeling of success is the fuel that drives the entire learning engine. When they understand the whole story, they get this massive surge of confidence. They think, wow, I just listened to a whole story in a foreign language, and I actually understood it.
It makes them feel capable.
Exactly.
Okay.
And capable learners are energized to tackle the next challenge, whereas overwhelmed learners just want to quit. You are building their stamina so that when they finally do hit the real world, they actually have the confidence to navigate the chaos.
Okay, that completely reframes the baby talk argument for me. You aren't lowering the bar to coddle them. You are basically sizing the hurdle so they can actually clear it and feel like an athlete.
Exactly. You're setting them up to win.
And having successfully cleared that hurdle with the listening material, the learner is now ready to output language. They are ready to actually speak. But to do that, they need an entirely different kind of space.
Which brings us to the silence.
Yes. This brings us to the most fascinating and, frankly, the most uncomfortable mechanic of the entire document, the mandated silence.
The 5-second rule. This is truly the linchpin of the entire methodology.
Let's look at how the document structures speaking in conversation practice. The teacher asks simple, relatable questions based on the topic. Things like, what do you usually do on weekends? Or, which one do you like?
Pretty standard stuff.
Right. But the crucial instruction, which is bolded repeatedly throughout the document, is this. Pause for 5 seconds after every single question.
And this rule is strictly enforced during the role-play sections as well, isn't it?
Yes. During the conversation practice, the teacher creates a short dialogue of 5 to 8 turns, and the instruction literally says, the teacher speaks, leaves the learner's part entirely blank, waits 5 seconds, and then continues naturally.
Wow.
It's like audio karaoke. Or playing catch with an invisible partner. You throw the ball, you stand there in absolute silence for 5 seconds, and then you just act like the ball was thrown back.
Describing it as playing catch with an invisible partner perfectly captures how unnatural it feels to a native speaker.
I mean, you listening to us right now, just think about a time someone asked you a question and then just stared at you in dead silence for 5 seconds.
It's a long time.
Let's just hold it and feel how long that actually is. 1, 2, 3.
4 or 5. Yeah, in a normal chat, that feels like an absolute eternity.
It really does. It feels hostile almost, or like someone dropped the ball.
Oh.
Our deeply ingrained social instinct is to rush in and just fill that dead air.
We view silence as a breakdown in communication. In a typical classroom, a teacher asks a question. The learner hesitates for maybe like 2 seconds, and the teacher immediately jumps in to rescue them.
Yeah, they'll rephrase the question or give a hint or just basically provide the answer.
Right, because the teacher feels awkward. They think they're helping.
But they aren't.
No. By jumping in, the teacher is entirely disrupting the learner's cognitive process. For an A2 learner, that silence isn't dead air at all. It is a wildly active construction zone.
Break down what is actually happening in their brain during those 5 seconds.
Okay, so first, they have to process the English words they just heard. Then they have to translate that concept into their native language just to understand the prompt.
Right, that's step 1.
Then they formulate their response in their native language. Next comes the hardest part. Translating that response back into English, basically searching their mental database for the right vocabulary and grammar.
That's a lot of mental gymnastics.
And finally, they have to summon the physical courage to speak those foreign words out loud.
For a native speaker, that entire chain reaction happens in milliseconds. We don't even realize we're doing it.
But for a beginner, that chain reaction takes several seconds. When the teacher interrupts at second number 3 to, help, they shatter the chain.
Oh, I see.
The learner has to abandon the sentence they were building and start the entire translation process over just to understand the teacher's new interruption. It's incredibly frustrating for the student.
So by legally binding the teacher to a 5-second wait, the blueprint essentially forces the teacher to suppress their own social anxiety for the benefit of the student.
Yes. It acts as a shield against anxiety. In linguistics, there's this concept called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yeah, you can think of it like an invisible suit of armor that a learner puts on when they feel stressed or judged. When that armor is up, new information just bounces right off, and they can't even access the vocabulary they already know.
Ah, the deer in the headlights?
Precisely.
Oh.
But when the learner knows they have a guaranteed silent 5-second window where they will absolutely not be rushed, corrected, or spoken over, that armor comes down.
The panic subsides.
Exactly. They realize the silence isn't a judgment of their speed, it's a dedicated workspace. By respecting their processing speed, you preserve their motivation.
So the learner has listened to an accessible story, they've practiced speaking in this protected, silent buffer zone, and they've avoided the freeze response.
Right? They are feeling good.
But motivation fades incredibly fast if you don't feel like you are actually retaining anything from day to day. If a 5-second silence works so well to build confidence, what happens when it's time to lock the information in?
That requires an entirely different psychological tool.
Which brings us to the final segment of the blueprint, the architecture of retention.
Because closing a lesson effectively requires just as much psychological engineering as opening it. You really have to give the learner a clear way to measure their growth.
And the blueprint does this through an incredibly rigid, almost mathematical structure. Step 6 focuses on pronunciation, targeting exactly 5 important words.
Very specific.
But then we hit the review and the homework sections, and the quotas become borderline obsessive. The teacher must provide exactly 10 important vocabulary words, exactly 5 useful sentences, and exactly 3 grammar points for the review.
And the homework assignments follow the exact same strict patterning.
Right. The homework is strictly 5 speaking questions, 5 shadowing sentences, and 1 short writing task that must be exactly 50 words long. Honestly, when I first read this section, I had the same reaction I had to the 40-word story.
You felt it was too rigid.
Yeah, I have to question the highly mathematical nature of this wrap-up. Why exactly 10 vocab words? Why exactly 3 grammar points? Doesn't this rigidity make the whole process feel, well, robotic?
It does sound a bit like a factory.
We're treating the learner like a machine that just needs the right data inputs. Doesn't that kill the organic, messy joy of learning a language?
On paper, It absolutely looks like a factory assembly line.
Yeah.
But if you view it through the lens of behavioral psychology, this extreme rigidity is actually a profound act of empathy.
Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack how assigning a strict 50-word quota is an act of empathy.
Think about the reality of learning a new language from scratch. It is essentially like being dropped into the middle of a massive, sprawling, unmapped city without a GPS.
Just total chaos.
There are hundreds of thousands of words, infinite sentence structures, and endless exceptions to grammar rules.
It's completely overwhelming. You have no idea where the boundaries even are.
So if a teacher casually says at the end of a lesson, review what we learned today, or write a short paragraph for homework, they are leaving the learner stranded in that massive city.
What does review even mean in that context?
Exactly. How long is a short paragraph? Should it take 10 minutes or 3 hours? The vastness of the task is paralyzing. The learner sits down at their desk at home, stares at a blank piece of paper, and that freeze response kicks in all over again.
Because a vague instruction invites anxiety. They don't know what the finish line looks like, so they just don't even start.
But if I give you a map that only shows one single block of that massive city, the task changes completely.
The boundary is set.
Right. If I tell you, your homework is to write exactly 50 words, I have drawn a hard box around the assignment. I have created clear, finite boundaries. You know exactly what success looks like. You write 50 words, you count them, you put down your pen, and you are officially done.
And you get the psychological satisfaction of checking the box.
Yes. And checking that box releases a literal hit of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical in our brain that reinforces behavior. When you complete a task and check the box, your brain rewards you.
That's fascinating.
These exact numbers, 10 words, 5 sentences, 3 grammar points, they prevent the learner from feeling crushed by the sheer volume of the English language.
It transforms an infinite, impossible task into a daily, achievable checklist.
And when progress feels achievable, long-term motivation is preserved. The learner doesn't dread the homework because they know exactly how much energy it will require. The boundaries aren't there to restrict their creativity. The boundaries are there to protect them from the overwhelm that causes so many people to just quit after a few weeks.
Wow, it really is incredible when you step back and look at how all these pieces fit together. I mean, every single rule points back to that overarching directive. Focus on speaking confidence over grammar perfection.
The blueprint recognizes that the biggest obstacle to learning isn't a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of psychological safety.
To synthesize what we've uncovered today, this source document is entirely disguised as a simple English lesson plan for elementary learners. But what it actually provides is a true masterclass in behavioral psychology and sustaining human motivation.
Absolutely.
By deliberately stripping away complex idioms, strictly limiting sentence lengths to accommodate working memory, engineering wins through bite-sized 80-word stories, and actively forcing those uncomfortable 5-second pauses, it systematically dismantles the fear of failure.
It completely neutralizes the conditions that cause the deer-in-the-headlights freeze response. It basically replaces the overwhelming pressure to be perfect with the time and space to simply be understood.
And it locks in those veins by providing rigid, mathematically precise boundaries, so the learner always knows exactly what success looks like. It's really a brilliant piece of instructional design.
It's beautifully engineered.
But before we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We've spent this time exploring how effectively this highly structured, pause-heavy, simple vocabulary approach works for learning a new language. It diffuses anxiety, lowers the defensive armor, and builds confidence in a vulnerable learner.
It's highly effective in a classroom setting, for sure.
So imagine taking these exact same rules and applying them outside of a classroom. Think about a time when you have to navigate a stressful, difficult conversation in your own native language.
Oh, that's interesting.
Maybe it's a heated argument with a partner or a tense negotiation with a boss at work. What would happen if you actively applied these A2 English rules to that high-stakes situation?
That would change everything.
What if you forced yourself to speak in short, 12-word sentences instead of rambling? What if you completely stripped away complex, emotionally charged phrasing and just used simple, clear vocabulary? And most importantly, what if you forced yourself to take a full silent 5-second pause before responding to every single thing the other person said? How might treating a stressful real-world conversation like an elementary language lesson completely change the way you communicate?